Okay, this is Algebra 1, Lesson 7. We're going to talk about opposite of a number. Alright, what does that mean? We can use a thought opposite of a number to help us understand and simplify expressions such as these. So let's look at this number line. I have 2 and negative 2. What does that mean? Isn't negative 2 the opposite distance from the origin 0 as positive 2? They're simply opposite. Alright? Same number, just different signs. So we can say negative 2 is the opposite of positive 2. And positive 2 is the opposite of negative 2. Alright? So how does that help us to do this? Well, we could say, use a negative and say, this is the opposite of 2 and the opposite of 2. So we start off with negative, and the opposite of 2 is negative 2, and the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Therefore, this is simply positive 2. Let's look at this one. You've got several layers here. You've got a bracket and a parenthesis. So you say the opposite of 2 is negative 2. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. And the opposite of positive 2 is negative 2. Therefore, this is negative 2. Yes, you with me so far? Then we could go the opposite of 2 and the opposite of 2 and the opposite of 2 is all going to give us negative 2. You're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Basically, another way of looking at it, these are implied negative 1s here, correct? So you have negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 2. Now, we have some rules, and the rules when you're multiplying negatives, if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is going to be negative. If you have an even number, it's going to be positive, because we learned our basic rule that says negative times a negative is going to give you a positive. A positive times a positive is going to give you a positive, and a negative times a positive is going to give you a negative. Okay? So, it takes 2 negatives to become positive, and 1 negative to become negative. So if you have an odd number, you have 5 there, that becomes positive, that becomes positive, and you're left with positive and a negative, with simply a negative. So therefore, if you have a negative number, an odd number of negatives, it's going to be negative, and an even number will give you positive. So let's look at some complicated ones. The book wants you to think about parentheses and inserting opposite of opposite of opposite. So you simply just count the negatives because they all mean multiplication. But let's look at some complicated problems. Alright? So let's do this. Let's simplify this. Negative times a negative 4 plus a negative 2 plus brackets negative times a negative. Okay, what is our answer? Well, first of all, we can go back to as simple as, what's our order of operation? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Let's do parentheses first. Well, I've got parentheses here. Can't do anything inside of it. Nothing in here, but I can here. Right? I have a parentheses. There's nothing you can simplify inside because it's simply negative 6. However, this means an implied negative 1 times that negative 6, because it's inside another layer of parentheses. So a negative times a negative is simply going to give you a positive 6. Now the next step is doing multiplication. Okay, do I have multiplication? Yes, I have an implied negative 1 times a negative 4. So if a negative times a negative gives simply a positive 4. So now I have nothing else to simplify, so I'm simply going to do positive 4 and negative 2. Different signs, find the difference, which is 2. 4 is bigger, it's positive, so it's positive 4. Plus bring this back down. My signs are the same, so I simply add the 2 numbers, which is 8, and keep that sign. So answer is positive 8, or simply 8. Yes? Okay, let's do another one. All right, let's do another complicated one. And simply, you can't, if it's parentheses on top of parentheses on top of parentheses, it's just a layer of multiplication. That's all that is. So don't let that confuse you. Don't let it scare you. So let's look at this: a negative to negative 3 minus bracket okay. How do we get that? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to circle each term. Okay? So we're going to keep that like that. We're going to circle, this goes all together because it's all by multiplication. We're going to circle all the brackets and parentheses. Okay? So now I've got these two. So simply I have a negative 1 times a negative 3. It's going to simply give me a positive, whoops, I don't know how to multiply, a positive 3. Then you've got this minus here. You can't forget that minus. Okay? Well, we're going to change it to a positive. Therefore, we're going to add another negative and braces. I've got to change, put that in, oops, negative. Then I go bracket negative, negative 2, bracket, braces, plus okay? Because I have this negative here, I had to put it with this. It goes to this number to change that to positive. So now I've got how many negatives? I start with them in their layer. Okay? There's no other number inside this parentheses. So it's simply negative 2 times a negative 1, which is positive 2, times a negative 1 is a negative 2. So I have positive 3 plus negative 2 plus, we have a negative and a negative, which is a positive 3. Or simply, I've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. They're all multiplied by each other. Remember, whenever you have brackets or braces or parentheses next to a number or a sign outside of it, it means multiplication. It simply means multiplication. It doesn't mean negative 1 minus this, because this parentheses and this parentheses, it means you multiply those together. So now I know my rules. Different signs, find the difference. Oops. Plus here. Okay, same signs, add them and keep that sign, or simply your answer is 3. That's all there is to that. It's not any more difficult, it's not any more complicated. Now, you're like, okay, this can be confusing with these parentheses. Let's do another one. If parentheses kind of get you too confusing, which to me, that is too confusing. I'd rather do this and do it mentally. Because eventually you're going to have to look at this mentally. So simply, I have a negative and a positive, negative 4. Negative and a negative is a positive 5. Positive is only one sign, so I bring that sign back down. I have two signs. Negative and a negative becomes a positive. Positive and negative becomes a negative. So simply I have negative 4 plus 5 plus 5 plus 3 minus 6. And so you can mentally put parentheses around these and say, and look at my sign numbers. 2 negatives, 6 and a 4. Because remember we said the sign to the left of the number belongs to the number, is the sign you take. 2 negatives, add them, keep the sign. 3 positive, 5 and 5 is 10, and 3 is 13. Different signs, find the difference. 13 is bigger. So your answer is simply 3. That's all there is to it. Shall we do another one? Let's do one more. And let's just picture mentally enclose parentheses. Okay? You have two negatives here. That's going to be positive 4. Positive and negative is minus 2. You got 1, 2, 3 layers separated by parentheses, which all imply negative 1 times those numbers. Yes? Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6 times a negative is a negative 6. Now, same signs here. Add them together. Positive 4. Now you've got different signs. Find the difference, which is 4, and keep the sign of the bigger number. And it's simply negative 4. That's all there is to it, and it's much simpler if you just say, take each thing and circle it, and make sure the sign goes with it. For instance, right here. You can't forget about the sign here. There's this negative there. Or actually, we put it right there. Okay? So this is it. Then you've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. Odd number of negatives multiplied by each other give you a negative. And that's it. Thank you.